Autistic unmasking in relationships. Last week, we looked at unmasking in existing intimate long-term relationships. Today's video will cover dating and new relationships. We'll look at unmasking, disclosure, how to avoid oversharing, showing up as a successful version of yourself, getting your support requirements met, and setting you up for the start of a successful long-term relationship. Hi everyone, Paul Mikolev here from Autism from the Inside. I make weekly videos sharing the human side of autism, so make sure you hit subscribe to get the latest content. Okay, unmasking in relationships and autistic dating when you're starting a new relationship. So it's probably no surprise to you that I really like structure. So I've broken this video down into 4 steps that you can use to balance showing up authentically, getting your needs met, and also being successful socially at the same time. And make sure you stick around to the end because I'll finish by sharing my #1 disclosure tip, a really powerful strategy of something you can share upfront that works in all types of situations to quickly and clearly communicate what you need. So step #1 is to start small with alignment. And what I mean by that is, and I don't know if you can relate to this as well, but when I meet someone, I want to share myself with them. I want to tell them about myself. I want them to get to know me. I want to tell them so many things. I want to disclose my quirks and my needs and all of these things. And what that leads to is an overall desire to overshare in the first 2 seconds worth of meeting someone. It looks like writing a mini essay on my dating profile, or using phrases like, "So just so you know, before we meet in person, here are the things that you need to know about me." A lot of us really value telling the truth. And so sometimes it feels like not saying something is almost a version of lying because I haven't disclosed when I should have disclosed. The solution to that, one strategy that I found really helpful, is to start small with alignment. So what that means is sharing 1 or 2 important things about myself, choosing the first thing that I'd like to share, and consciously acknowledging that there is a lot more to this complex human being you see in front of you than I have already shared in the first 5 seconds worth of meeting someone. Think about what information I'm including on a dating profile, for example. I personally did not mention autism. I did not mention my political or religious beliefs. I didn't mention my grades in school. I'm not even sure I mentioned my job. I didn't say things like how much money I have in the bank or anything about my complex social preferences and needs. And it's not because none of those things are important. It's because if I turn up in an authentic way, I will kind of embody all of those things without necessarily needing to explain them explicitly. I don't need to explain to someone the nuances of my life philosophy. I can just live my life and they will get a sense of my life philosophy. So to give you an example, when I was dating, the first thing I showed to people, the first impression, the first kind of sense of who I am, was that I am friendly, interesting, and curious. Friendly in the sense that I want to be positive, inviting, non-threatening. Interesting in the sense that I want to show a glimpse that there are lots of interesting things that I could tell you about myself if you took the time to get to know me. And curious in the sense that I want to get to know you. I'm a good listener. I would enjoy hearing about you. And for me, in the first instance, that was it. I did not try and explain anything more complicated than that. It's just a general expression of a vibe designed to help someone get a sense of whether they want to start interacting with me or not and find out more about me or not. And having that in my brain as an explicit strategy helped me to remind myself that the rest, the detail, the complexness that I want to share but I can't share too quickly, all of that stuff will come out later in due course if the relationship progresses to that level. And the trick with that, again, is this concept of alignment. You've probably heard me talk quite a bit about this in recent unmasking videos. It's a really core life coaching concept. When what's on the inside roughly matches what's on the outside, and what I haven't shared yet, again, roughly matches what I have already disclosed, then when you do see something new, when I do share something that you didn't know before, then no one is surprised. If I told you, "Oh, I've recently got into rock climbing and I sometimes do that on the weekend," the response might be, "Oh, okay, cool, I didn't know that about you." Whereas if I said, "Oh yeah, I didn't mention this before, but I'm actually a professional cyclist and I came 3rd in the Tour de France last year," your response might be a little bit more like, wait a minute, hang on. How does that fit with everything else I know about you? How do you have so much time to do that? And you're traveling around the world and you're competing in international cycling competitions, and that is just not really anything like what I thought you were doing in your free time. So you can see that there are two main reactions there. If it's an appropriate level of proportional disclosure, the reaction is probably going to be something like, oh, okay, cool, I didn't know that about you. But if it's not really in alignment with what you've already shared, the reaction might be more like a big shocking reveal. Oh, that changes things a little bit. Thank you for disclosing that to me. And sometimes there may be things that fall into that big category that would otherwise not be obvious, and you do need to tell someone eventually. But for the most part, my strategy was the first one. Instead of outlining things explicitly, I would just let them be in the background. And then when I finally tell you that I'm autistic, or I finally tell you that I happen to like certain type of music, it's not a surprise. And if anything, the reaction might be, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. What does being autistic mean to you? And we can actually have a real conversation about it. So that was strategy 1, start small with alignment. Strategy 2 is to stay authentic and do what you sometimes do. A big question that comes up is, how much should I modify myself to fit into a situation before it starts to become masking? And again, the concept of alignment helps a lot here. If what I'm projecting on the outside roughly matches what's on the inside, fantastic. It's a little bit like wearing clothes. I'm not trying to hide what's underneath my clothes. It's not a secret, but it's also not socially appropriate to walk around without clothes in most contexts. So contrast wearing clothes to wearing a costume. One of my favorite examples of this, I did a very, very early video where I went to a Halloween party dressed up as Gumby. I had a lot of fun, but it was not me. So in a similar way to the start small strategy, I'm going to be sharing more and more of myself with a person as our relationship deepens. So when we first meet, I'm likely to be wearing a lot of things that I don't always wear. And the key distinction that I'm trying to make in this strategy is, if I sometimes wear those things, if I am sometimes that personality type or that type of energy, fantastic. I'm showing you an authentic side of myself. But if I never do that, if I actually really hate doing that, then that's probably not starting the relationship off on the right foot. A good personal example for me is when I was doing that friendly, interesting, curious type of personality. That takes quite a bit of energy. I mean, it's an authentic version of me. I do that sometimes, but to be upbeat and positive and pay attention, it just requires me to put in a little bit more into that situation. So is that a mask? I would say yes and no. Mostly no. It would be a mask if I pretended that that's how I am all the time. But if at an appropriate time, I share that I also have a low energy version of myself. So sometimes I like to go out and be social and talk to people and stuff. And other times I prefer things that have significantly less demands on me. So the main criteria, is this something I sometimes do? Do I sometimes like to dress up? Do I sometimes like to go out to a restaurant for dinner? Do I sometimes like to put on an extroverted persona and go talk to strangers? If the answer is no, then you got to be asking yourself, why would you do that on a first date? If someone asked me, hey, would you like to go to a dance club? It'll be really fun. I never go to a dance club. I don't think it would be fun. And so I'm going to pass on that one. Strategy number 3 is to use any adjustments you need from the start. Imagine if you went on a date with a wheelchair user and they spent the whole night trying to pretend that they didn't need a wheelchair, like making excuses for why they couldn't stand up. If there is something that you need, use it from the start, like earplugs, hand cream, glasses. If you can be discreet, fantastic. Wear contact lenses instead of glasses and don't tell anyone if you sometimes do that. You don't have to disclose, I'm sorry, I really have something to tell you. I'm wearing contact lenses at the moment and I just thought you should know that. It's fine. If you treat whatever you need as something normal, then you're setting up the relationship for that to be normal. And again, this comes back to the start small strategy. It can be tempting to hand someone a 400-page essay with all of your quirks before you've even met, but needless to say, that's usually unhelpful. And when it comes to communicating the kind of atypical things that you need, again, less is often more when you're trying to communicate that. One of my favorite examples, a friend of mine uses the phrase, "I have complex health needs." And I really love that phrase because it's really short. It communicates everything that you need to know, which is it's a health thing, it's complicated, I'm probably going to need things or make decisions that don't necessarily make sense to you because it is complicated, and no, I'm not going to explain the whole thing to you right now. So in some cases, there might be some support requirements that you need to disclose upfront, but just make sure it's actually necessary and you're using as few words as possible to communicate as clearly as you can. And when we wrap up at the end of the video, I'll share my favorite upfront disclosure strategy that works in a lot of different situations. Okay, finally, number 4, be yourself as much as possible and deal with little conflicts as they arise. So what that looks like is communicating what you like and what you don't like and what you're happy with and what you're not really happy with. And if that triggers some kind of conflict, it's probably going to be a small conflict in the beginning, then you get a chance to address that before it gets any bigger. Hey, would you like to go see a movie? Actually, I really don't like watching movies. What if we go for a walk in the park instead? If I didn't tell you that I don't like watching movies, then maybe we start building a relationship around watching movies because that's what you've suggested. And then eventually later on, I finally tell you, actually, I don't really like watching movies. So by simply being honest about my preferences in the beginning, we can avoid that kind of bigger conflict later. I'll give you a couple of examples. When I was dating, one of the biggest things that I was just not happy to do because it took so much of my time and energy was chatting via SMS. Some people really like to chat via SMS. I am not one of those people, and if you are looking for a partner who is happy to chat via SMS, I am not suitable for that role. And it is in both our interests that you find someone else. So that was a very important boundary for me to recognize within myself, and I don't necessarily need to say it explicitly. My options are either just reply in the way that I like to reply, at the speed that I like to reply, and don't feel the pressure to do more than that. Or I could say it explicitly and I could name the fact that it looks like you really want me to chat via SMS at the moment. I'm not doing that. It's not because I don't like you. It's because I don't like to chat via SMS. How about you give me a call or write me a letter or we meet in person or anything else, because I'm happy with those things because I do like you, but I do not chat via SMS. And again, what that does is it allows the other person to decide if this is a deal breaker for them or not. And if they're happy with the situation, perfect. And if they're not happy and they actually really want someone who can do that, then at least we know that up front. Another really good example, I went on a date with a woman who got upset because she wanted me to text her to see if she got home okay. And that's a reasonably common thing. A lot of people want that. I can see why that would be desirable. But ultimately, it was not something I was happy to do. That kind of thing would have taken a lot more energy than I was willing to give. And in the exact circumstances, I was not happy to do that. So we talked about it. We understood each other's reasons, which made perfect sense. To be fair, she was literally from a significantly less safe country where that kind of thing is even more important. And for me, I talked about my energy and how I don't always follow social convention if it's not absolutely necessary. So as it turned out, this little difference wasn't a deal breaker. We even went on another date after that. And when we eventually decided not to pursue anything romantic, we even stayed friends for a while. But the point is that talking about this conflict really early on identified some really important things, which were actually much bigger than the isolated incident of "you didn't send me a text message." In this case, it turns out that she had some quite traditional values, and quite a few of the accommodations I make for myself in everyday social life were quite difficult for her to accept. For her, that's just not the way you do it, which meant that accepting my level of constant deviation from the social norm was quite challenging. And what does that mean? It means we can be friends, but we probably shouldn't be life partners. And therefore, by deliberately being myself and trying not to mask, I gave the relationship the best chance of long-term success, which in this case meant that we learned pretty quickly that we weren't right for each other, and then we were free to move on. Anyway, I should probably wrap up there, I think. This video has already gone on significantly longer than I had originally planned, and I also haven't shared my favorite upfront disclosure tip with you yet either. So in summary, those 4 steps were to start small with alignment, Focus on what's important. Start with your one best foot forward and don't over-explain yourself in the beginning. Number 2 was to stay authentic and do what you sometimes do. It's okay to put a bit of effort into a situation, but if that's something that you would literally never do normally, then that might be a problem. Number 3 was use any adjustments you need from the start, and that way you're normalizing, prioritizing your own needs as a non-negotiable. And finally, be yourself as much as possible and talk about small conflicts as they arise, because very often those little conflicts in the very early days of a relationship will be indicators of much larger things that will affect the long-term success of the relationship. So finally, as promised, my favorite upfront disclosure technique. Sometimes you need a lot of things that are really complicated, and as per my previous suggestion, anything that you do communicate has to be short, clear, and concise. So to get around that problem, I found that a general catch-all kind of explanation can be really helpful. And the one I like to use is, sometimes a situation becomes too much for me and I need to take a break. That's it. No further explanation. I might answer some questions if necessary based on a specific scenario, but the heads up in advance that I might have to do something unexpected in a situation to take care of myself is usually enough that when something happens, it's not a complete surprise. The sometimes at the beginning indicates that my needs vary quite a bit from situation to situation. The too much for me indicates that there's a real boundary there. It's not just a preference. And the take a break is also extremely non-specific, allowing me to do whatever I need to do in the situation to take a break, whatever take a break looks like. So anyway, that's my favorite strategy, so feel free to use that too if it's helpful for you. As usual, if you'd like more on this topic, I've done quite a few videos already on unmasking that you might like to check out. I also have an online emotional intelligence course and do one-on-one life coaching. So thanks again for watching and sticking all the way to the end of the video. It helps me a lot if you like this video and leave a comment. I'd love to hear if it resonated with you. Otherwise, thanks again for watching and I will see you again next week. Bye.